Hello and welcome to another episode of Upfront. I'm Song Se-ryun. With the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to Korea, the two countries have agreed to upgrade their bilateral relationship into a special strategic partnership. This is a significant milestone in Korea-India relations, as Korea will be joining Russia and Japan as the only countries with such close relationship with India. And many Korean companies are already looking forward to the opportunities it brings in the Indian market. On today's Upfront, we discuss the significance of improving bilateral relations with India, a rising power within the international community.
Recently, India and its rapid growth rate has been drawing global attention. In July, IMF, or the International Monetary Fund, forecast a global growth rate of 3.3%, while the Indian economy was projected to grow an impressive 7.5%. In fact, India had posted 7.5% economic growth in the first quarter of 2015, overtaking that of China and demonstrating its potential as the next global economic powerhouse. Behind India's rapid economic growth is Modenomics, an economic policy put forth by Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who took office in May 2014. The core of Modenomics consists of building infrastructure and creating more jobs by attracting foreign investment. At the center of the policy is the campaign called Make in India, which aims to develop the manufacturing sector by increasing the proportion of manufacturing from 15% to 25% and building a better environment for companies through reforms. As India's profile rises in the global economy, bilateral cooperation between India and Korea has also been gaining focus, beginning with the summit meeting which took place in May this year.
오늘 회담이 양국 관계 격상 또 협력 강화를 위한 중요한 이정표가 되기를 희망합니다.
मेरे और मेरे डेलीगेशन का आपने जिस प्रकार से स्वागत किया, सम्मान किया और इसके लिए
The summit has given rise to hopes for bilateral cooperation to be expanded to various fields. And on this week's Upfront, we discuss the strengthened bilateral ties between Korea and India, as well as its direction for the future.
To help us navigate today's topic, we're joined by four guests today. We're joined by Dr. Cho Choong-jae, head of South Asia team at Korea Institute for International Economic Policy.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
And we have Alok Kumar Roy. He's a professor of Indian Studies at Busan University of Foreign Studies.
Good to see you.
We have Choi Joon-suk, editor-in-chief at the Chosun Weekly, who worked as a correspondent in New Delhi.
Thank you.
And lastly, we have Rahul Raj, is a professor of liberal arts and internationalization at Gyeongju University.
Good to see you.
Welcome all to the program.
Thank you.
Let's start with a little bit about India. India has been getting a lot of spotlights these days, and specifically economic outlook has been spectacular. IMF and the internal outlook and the forecast has been the growth of 7.5%. Is this a right forecast, do you think? Is it really rosy picture as it predicts? Dr. Cho.
Yes, if we have to pick up one among the potential emerging countries, it will be India. Its stock price has been the breaking record since the last quarter of 2013. And actually, the India growth more than 7% of GDP growth rate in quarterly for the last four consecutive quarters. And the 7.5% of the GDP growth rate in this year, in the first quarters, it is already overtake China's growth rate. Mm-hmm. That's why most the analysts, including the IMF and World Bank, have a good forecast that India will overtake China in terms of the growth rate.
I see. behind this growth, actually, India's spectacular growth forecast is kind of a rosy picture in otherwise a very gloomy international economic situation.
Yes.
And probably what has happened in India is Modi happened.
Yes.
Last year, he came into power, and it seems like he's a very powerful and also very popular figure. And a lot of people also say that he was very fortunate that they came into the power when the oil price is pretty low. How do you assess his strength as a leader in pulling this economy out of it?
Well, before coming to question, I will tell you something about Modi. He has a long experience of administration, as he was the Chief Minister of Gujarat, where he brought his state in the top position in terms of growth and also created a business-friendly environment. Now, coming back to your question on Modinomics, he's like focusing on minimum government and maximum governance. And now he's emphasizing in that let the government should confine its role in providing public goods, social welfare systems, and rest should be left to the market. It doesn't mean that market will do anything they want. In that part, government will have the monopoly power to act. But he emphasized that unnecessary intervention in the market creates uneasiness, which is not good for the economy. Second point, I will try to say that he's focusing on growth of the economy in different way. Generally, when we see growth, we think that GDP growth or other economic index numbers. It may give the indication of the health of the economy, but sometimes number doesn't match the ground reality. That's why he's focusing on the growth of the economy with creating jobs. That's why he's moving around the world and asking for the investment. That's his one point. Now, if you see that although India also tried to replicate East Asia, or to say Korean-style economy, based on labor industrialization, but in the early 90s, but somewhere it failed. Now Modi is again trying to focus on that. So when we say his Act-East policy, the Act-East policy is not only to attract investment, it's also to learn from these countries. And of course, Korea is one of the important countries in that part. So that's called like Modinomics.
I see. In that sense, there's a little bit of contrast between India's policy and China policy. China very heavy on the state-led economics, but as Professor Raj pointed out, there is a healthy focus on the market system.
Well, you're right, but I'd like to say this, So Prime Minister Modi is very lucky to have a good predecessor with a very bad record.
Yes.
That's very important, especially for the first year of the Prime Minister.
So in comparison, he looks very good.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. In terms of system itself, do you see the difference
I would like to add something more, especially on the economics, the policies. The Modinomics are usually defined as, you already mentioned, business-friendly and high economic growth policies. The mechanism is to make create the virtuous cycle that the investment create new jobs, which is leading to the more income. The more income lead to the more the consumptions. The more consumptions naturally lead to the investment more. So to make like this, the virtuous circles is the aim of the Modinomics. But the problem is there are so many obstacles in India to protect the investment, such as lack of infrastructures and other administrative delayed, and so many the regulations. The context of Modinomics is to get rid of the obstacles and improve the infrastructures.
I see.
In brief, I would say it is the realities that is forcing Modi to be more aggressive in inviting foreign investments in India, or Make it India policy. But the idea is this: India has been a tiger, not a tiger. India has been an elephant, not a tiger, Asian tiger. And as usual, tigers, they don't run fast. But this was not
The elephant.
this was not to the expectations of people. So now he really wants to do is bring in the old mythology where one of the elephants could fly. So he wants to add a wing to this elephant, which is not easy. It is easy said,
If
but
not
it's very
impossible.
difficult. Yes, but at the same time, he has set the direction. He has set his policy priorities very right, and he is looking for a transparent way to infuse dynamism in the economy, and that is what Modi economics would stand for.
I'm not an economist, but so I can say this: I'm very optimistic about India's future success. Well, look at very prominent CEOs at the global corporation. There are so many Indian origins there. But have you heard about any Koreans there? I don't think so.
I mean,
So this is a huge success in terms of individual level, and Indians can make it happen in the country level, I believe.
I see. Let me push back a little bit to Professor Raj. You talked about the importance of market that Prime Minister Modi has emphasized on. But he's also criticized because of the slowness of the reform and specifically because he was very slow in privatization. Does that go against his policy?
See, I will say that Modi government has won the election, but he hasn't won the election. He doesn't have the majority in the upper house. So he has some obstacles. Now, coming to your point that he hasn't been as fast in the economic reforms, when we see he has increased the FDI in the insurance sector, he has opened FDI in defense and railways, and the GST bill is in the parliament consideration, maybe in the next parliament session. Now, on the concerns being raised in the Indian society, one of the important issue is land acquisition. Land acquisition, and I will say is that, see, there are different opinions on land acquisition, and it would be not proper to comment because the bill is still in the parliament for consideration. Now, you see, India is an agrarian country. And agriculture constitutes a major part of Indian society and Indian economy. Now, however, when the country slowly but gradually develops, and when the urbanization takes place, land will be required, for which the government is trying to find out the way.
I see.
And basically, land is a state subject, and the government is encouraging the states to compete with each other, and each states are coming with their own industrial policies to attract investment without hurting the common man. Now, the second issue concerned in the society, most importantly, the last budget of our finance minister, Arun Jaitley, he has reduced the corporate tax from 30% to 25%. This has become an issue of debate. But now you see the corporate tax in the whole ASEAN region. There are also manufacturing hubs. The corporate tax is less than 25%. Now, when we say India to make an attractive business destination, when we say India to make it as a global manufacturing hub, we have to make ourselves competitive. So that's also said. So Modi has to find out a win-win situation. It should not be like the business is happy and the society is unhappy.
In May, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi made a visit to Korea. In the Korea-India summit, the two countries agreed to elevate the bilateral relationship from CEPA to a special strategic partnership and discussed a variety of issues.
모디 총리님과 저는 오늘 양국 관계의 새로운 장을 열어나갈 한인도 특별 전략적 동반자 관계를 위한 공동 성명을 채택하게 되었음을 기쁘게 생각합니다.
One of the major contents of the summit was the upgraded bilateral ties between the two countries, which is expected to expand trade. Also, cooperation on infrastructure projects within India, including the construction of smart cities, has also been strengthened. Aside from economic cooperation, cooperation in space exploration has also been enhanced. Lastly, the Indian government has shown its strong support for the Korean government's Northeast Asia Peace and Cooperation Initiative. We had a chance to hear from Lee Jun-gyu, Korean ambassador to India, on his outlook for the strengthened bilateral ties.
Indian people still vividly remember that Korea responded most positively to India's call of look-east policy in early 90s. Many Korean brands which entered in those days have now become household names in India. India wants to share Korea's experiences of economic development. India regards Korea as the most valuable partner in the economic drive. Now, you may expect much further economic cooperations in various fields between our two countries.
Korea and India have already seen tangible results in the financial and manufacturing sectors. As economic cooperation between the two countries continues to expand, Korea and India are expected to play critical roles in bringing innovative change to the global economy.
Let's focus on the relationship between Korea and India. This is not the first time that we started talking about this relationship. Actually, it began back in 1990s when India had a policy of look east, look nearby. It's been about 15 years, 25 years.
More than that, yes.
How far have we come?
Yes, we have seen all the developments happening since 1991. A lot of Korean business went to India long time ago. But it has been slow and steady. Korea has not gone the same way it has gone to China or other countries. But Korea has also been the main beneficiary of the Indian market. Most of the Korean companies that has joined India, be it LG, Samsung, they have the highest profit that they could get from any other parts in the world. So it is partly because of the huge market, and they went for the market. Sometimes the sluggishness is because of lack of information that they had about India. India was, though mentally or psychologically very close to the Korean minds, still physically it was very far off.
I see.
So that was one of the reasons. And the slow penetration has not been bad. But you will see that Indian companies in last 6 years, they have invested in Korea very heavily. In fact, what Korea has done in last 20 years, Indians have done in last 7 years, almost. So this has been a reciprocal investment, and that has been a very positive thing in Indo-Korean relations. Of course, SEPA, the first 2 years, the growth rate was pretty good. I think every year it was growing by 20% or so. But then global recession was the cause for slowdown. And we could not achieve as much probably we should have.
I see. Editor Chair, we've seen this relationship develop to SEPA, actually, 5 years ago, the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement.
I'd like to comment on the Look East policy. This was initiated by Prime Minister Narasimha Rao in year 1992.
Yes.
Traditionally, India has been looking westward, not the eastward. Western frontier is the place where new ideas comes and enemies comes into India. Northern part and eastern part, there are mountains and oceans, and so India has not to worry about anything.
Natural barriers there.
So they have no history of looking east. And so in 1992, Look East policy is a new beginning and eye-opening chance to the Indians. And it opens the Indian economy, and it brought many growth rate to Indian government. And new government, BJP-led Modi government, choose new policy named Act East policy. Not just to look east, just act now This is the new policy. I think this is very interesting. Yeah.
And when
Do you
you
think
say
it's
More involvement into the East Asian region. That's the will and policy of Indian government.
Does it help a Korean relationship, or does that?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
when he talks about East, it is not only the Far East that he's talking about, China, Japan, Korea. With them already the relationship has been very good. But he is also looking at the South Asia and Southeast Asian market, and where so far you will see that there are very invisible Berlin walls within Southeast Asia and also in Southeast Asian countries. So when he is talking about Act East, you could see it recently. He went to Bangladesh, where he not only committed $2 billion credit, but also the Indian investment has promised some $4.5 billion of investment, especially in energy and infrastructure. Same thing happened with Nepal. So when he talks about this Act East, he is taking everybody into consideration, and everybody should take part in this co-prosperity. That is what his policy change is.
I see. The Korea-India relationship will benefit from that kind of focus.
Yes.
Dr. Cho, getting back to the specifically Korea-India relationship for the past 10 years and 20 years.
Yeah, during the 40 years.
Right.
Yeah, 40 years of the relations between both.
40 years accounting.
Yes, after establishment of diplomatic relationship, the export and the investment to India increased moderately. But it is not a great achievement considering its potential and economic size. Well, India and Korea is the third largest and fourth largest the GDP scale in Asia. So that's why our potential is higher, but the achievement is less than our expectations. And for example, the Korean investment in India is less than 1/10 of that of Japan, according to Indian's data, while Japan invested 1.7 billion the last years. Korea invested just only $300 million. It's too much gaps. And Japan has provided about 1.5 billion ODA every year for the last 5 years average. But Korea was not able to provide a dime. And issue of the SEPA, when we start the SEPA, we were very hopeful. But however, trade between the both stagnated after it exceeded $20 billion in 2011. And until now, it leveled off no more than $20 billion. And the joint committee to increase concession rate has not been held since January 2011. And the usage also very low compared with another FTA with Korea. And so that's why we need the boosting its usages by improving the level of concessions.
I see. And that's a good point. Then the question is whether this special strategic partnership does that. Does that change the kind of shortcomings and the past mistakes we had in terms of the relationship? Do you think it sufficiently addresses those points?
Yes, especially when we talk about strategic relations. Many new areas have been added to it, and one of them is security relationship, where a lot could be done.
I see.
India has, of course, sent satellites to Mars at a cost that is very cheap. Modi himself said that it is cheaper than a scooter taxi goes for, per liter, if you can imagine.
Right.
So it is very cheap. In certain areas, we have the expertise, but in other conventional areas, like simple conventional weapon making, there has been plenty of delays in India. And Korea has been almost self-reliant in manufacturing those things. So this area is where the security relations can improve. India is also very keen on not only this small household things, but it also wants the heavy industries to come to India, shipbuilding, light aircraft, and other things. where probably Korea is number one. And strategic partnership means this. One important aspect of it is that they have decided 2+2 platform of meeting. This 2+2 means Indian foreign minister, defense minister will meet the Korean counterparts.
I see.
And this is something that is very crucial for future growth.
I see. I see. Let's focus on what you just brought about, the manufacturing sector, which has been very important for the Korean economy, and also very important and actually the focus of Prime Minister Modi's future plans. But Dr. Cho, let me ask you, does this kind of create a tension because Korea is working on it and India is working on it in terms of manufacturing focus? Are we going to be a competitor, or is there a win-win relationship?
Yeah, fortunately, the possibilities of the nutcracker or the boomerang effect is relatively low because the industrial gap is huge. For example, the manufacturing accounts for Korea's manufacturing accounts for almost 50%, but India is just 17%. The goal of the Make India is increased to boost the proportions to 25% by 2022 and create 100 jobs, 100 million jobs. So by this India aimed to be the manufacturing hub like the China. But during the visit, you already mentioned the Prime Minister Modi invite Korea to be a best partner to improve the Indian manufacturing capacities and modernization of the Indian industries. And President Park also positively responded. What is the important is to achieve the concrete result.
Yes.
By tackling obstacles rather than to focus on obstacles.
Right. Many Korean companies have shown interest in the Indian market, and we had a chance to meet with Kim Kwang-ro, chairman of the Productivity Initiative, to hear more about opportunities and strategies for the Indian market.
The big corporation is not much. The big corporation, I think less than 10, but the medium size, who is working for the big corporation, will be maybe 300, something like that. I feel the manufacturing and the other maybe transportation, the logistic, and I think service, the technical service, that for example the computer or that electronic, the technical service, those kind of field, the big possibility. You know, the most important thing is that for Korean company to be successful in India, that the Korean company must have a good cultural understanding about India. I can say there is a cultural intelligence. Nowadays, the AI is very popular, but I say that the cultural intelligence, that means the Korean company, the people, Korean government must understand that the Indian culture, Indian people, then they can do the good business, good operation through Indian people.
We heard from Kim Kwang-ro. He had his experiences and his perspectives on the Indian market. Now let's focus on other sectors. We talked about the manufacturing sector, but IT sector is a very interesting sector for both countries. India obviously very strong in the IT sector, and also Korea kind of built this kind of powerhouse with that sector in mind. Now again, the same question probably is the same thing. Do we have the win-win situation in this? In what areas we can work together to benefit both countries?
In fact, Modi already said that he plans 100 smart cities, which is not only smart cities, probably he will have to have many millions of smart villages as well included into it. So the smart city means what? Today everybody wants to live in 21st century. Nobody wants to live in 19th century. And this is where the scope is. Korea is very good in hardware and also the necessary infrastructure that it can provide. Indians are lacking in infrastructure development, be it internet or other things. There's plenty of scope and market where the two sides could join together. And if Korea misses this opportunity, probably somebody else will grab it. That's what Koreans should always think about. Because for Indians today, especially young Indians, they don't want to wait anymore. They are eager for a change. And everybody has to take part in this change. And this is where I think Korea and Indian interest is more reciprocal than conflicting.
Are there any other areas that we should focus in terms of getting to know each other? We talked about defense, which is a very useful kind of the way to think about it, because the defense is a common interest, but that leads to the common interest in also economic sectors.
Yes. I will add, see, the government of India started this smart city project. Rather than looking at other countries, we try to look at Korea. Korea has been very successful in building smart cities. Songdo and Dongtan are the shining examples, where Korea has successfully incorporated all the principles of green design. And even the Songdo is the first city in the world where all the buildings will meet all the LEED requirement. Now the government of India is planning to build the smart cities. As you see, currently, the 30% of urban population contributes 60% of India's GDP. And it is projected that the urban population will contribute 75% of India's GDP. Now, when you see the urbanization, India needs more cities. Now, everyone cannot sit in Delhi and Bombay. It has its own capacity. So, Korea has the best example and has the cutting-edge technology. I say this is the one area where Korea should not be left behind, and Korea should be in the front row with its cutting-edge technology. You know, in India, we know Korea. Many people they know Korea by LG, Samsung, Hyundai. I think let Korea also be known by making smart cities in India. Coming back to the space part, now see, India sends satellite, the cheapest in the world. That is one of the area where Korea and India can cooperate, and Korea can also learn from India. When it comes to ICT, today 30% of software employers in Samsung are Indians. Now, if you see the big companies like Samsung, LG, SK, they are already there in India. It's time to encourage the medium enterprises to come and join this area. And I will say, if you see, Korea has shortage of software developers where India can fulfill. So I think this is one of the area of ICT where both countries can cooperate successfully, and both are complementary to each other.
I see. There's a happy marriage between the software sector from India and the hardware, which has been pretty good.
Can I add more? The smart city is related to the two cooperation sector between Korea and India. One is the ICT sector, and the other is the urban development sectors. First, the ICT sectors, when it comes to the developing countries, people usually imagine the market potentials and cheap labors and the natural resources. But with these, India has something special. That is the ICT experts. We can use Indian brains, not just hands. And Korea exclusively allowed India to ease the movement of the independent professionals in the Korea-India SEPA. Among the 163 professions, ICT constitute about 90s. So Korean big companies have no problem, and they are using well the Indian ICT expert. The problem is the SMEs of Korea. So we have to make more the support system for the SMEs to use more Indian export easily.
I see.
Also, Korea, one area that Korea could focus on is to set up research and development wings in India. In Fortune List 500, all the companies have set up their research wing in some city in India. It is because of the high quality labor at a competitive price. Name any company, Google or any Apple, any company, their research comes basically from India. Korean drug companies were planning to go to India. I think they should take this opportunity to use the research facilities and research brains available in India to expand in a smart way.
Take advantage of the manpower that
Yes.
India has. And now we're joined by an expert in international politics to hear more about the significance of Korea-India cooperation. It's a Professor Tribesh Singh Maini, Senior Research Associate at Jindal School of International Affairs. Hello.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has recently visited Korea and agreed to upgrade the bilateral ties with Korea. How is Korea-India cooperation viewed by the Indian society?
I think, the best part about this relationship is that there is a political consensus. So irrespective of whichever government is there, whether it's a Congress government or a BJP government, there is a strong political consensus. That's the first thing. The second thing is, over the past 2 decades, it's not just the economic relationship which has gained, but slowly but surely even people-to-people contact, because you have a large number of Korean expats in India. Now, we often joke around that, the Korean expats adapt the best to India because of Korean food and Indian food being very similar, So there is that angle of both, the economic and strategic relationship, along with the aspect of soft power. We are also seeing an increase in the number of tourists. For example, between 2013 and 2014, there was a 20% increase in the number of Indian tourists visiting South Korea. And I think there's this talk about a visa on arrival for Indian tourists. If that actually happens, and I think that would be a win-win as well. That would further enhance the people-to-people linkages.
See, India has achieved a rapid economic growth recently. Do you think that Prime Minister Modi has played a significant role in India's development over the past year?
I think one of the major contributions which Prime Minister Modi has made so far is to flag the issue of infrastructure and connectivity. Now this, if you have strong connectivity between different parts of India, you have more, if you strengthen your railways, if you have more airports, definitely it helps in bolstering the economic growth and, prosperity.
Bilateral ties between Korea and India have been strengthened by the India-Korea Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement signed in 2010, as well as recent summit talks between the two leaders. What are your focal points in bilateral ties between Korea and India?
I think the first thing is, India has a lot to learn from South Korea in terms of infrastructure. In fact, I think during the recent visit of Prime Minister Modi, South Korea had also, $10 billion was probably assigned for assistance for infrastructure. I think in the area of infrastructure, we have a lot to learn from South Korea. So whether it's highways, whether it's the railway network, we have a lot to learn. Then strategically, we have similar threats. You have a neighbor who is threatening for you, and there is this nexus which is building up between one of our neighbors and your neighbor. So I think even in the strategic sphere, there is common ground between us.
Thank you so much for sharing your insights. That was Professor Tribesh Singh Maini, a Senior Research Associate at Jindal School of International Affairs. He brings up an important point, and we can probably expand our discussion to beyond the economic area and the trades, about being a neighbor. And that entails the security concerns and the political implications. Now, with this collaboration, do you see, Editor Che, a point to collaborate politically and also diplomatically?
a few years ago, so I went to India to cover, to write my story, and one Indian TV channel is Lok Sabha TV. Yes, I aired in that show, and that happened just before the visit of President Lee Myung-bak, and there I talked about I'd like to see the Indian Prime Ministers coming to Korea. Until then, there's no Indian Prime Minister coming to Korea. But 5 years ago, 5 years passed, 5 years passed, or 6 years passed. Well, we are seeing the Indian Prime Ministers coming to Korea, or himself, and it is a rapid development of relationship between two countries. It's a very good sign. Look at the joint statement between two leaders. Well, they agreed to visit or to hold the summit meetings annually on or either side, either country or at the margins of international affairs.
How about the security issues between these two countries?
Yes.
I think the focus could be that there is a sense that the rising China is an opportunity, but also it raises a concern about the security in the region, and the United States keen about it, and Korea probably is thinking about it. With the collaboration and the better relationship with India, does that have an implication in the security area?
I think it is, so profound changes taking place in this region. So rebalancing of powers, change of powers, and Chinese emergence and territorial dispute between China and Japan around the Senkaku Island, and another territorial dispute between China and Southeast Asian countries,
right,
like Philippines and Vietnam. And this is very, these factors are unstabilizing the regions. We saw the Indian navies coming to this area. India and Vietnam held joint naval exercise a few years ago. Think about it. How come? Well, we can never think about Indian armies, Indian navies coming to these regions. Indians belongs to Indian Sea, Indian Ocean, not the Pacific Ocean. So they showed big interest in this region, and also well, look at the joint statement between two Korea and India summit. India showed their strong willingness to keep and hold national interest in this region. They said, joint statement said, India sees the Korea as the indispensable partner in its Act East strategy. I think this means a huge.
Yes. There is, however, slight difference in approach. It is not so much of balancing or rebalancing, but engaging. Engagement would be the better word, because we should not fall into the Western trap that has always happened. There's a vacuum of power and somebody needs to fill it up. India, especially its relation with China, you will see that we have certain challenges. Our border issues still are unresolved. But still, India and China has cooperated more than, they don't want a conflict issue to be out of control. So engagement has been the main policy, and in this engagement, extension of engagement, that is how probably India is moving into, Indian naval ships are moving into Vietnam, or for that matter, it is coming to Japan, China, or even practicing with the Chinese army. So engagement is more Asian than Western concept, I would say. You see the world history, in last 100 years, probably the West had more than 1,000 wars. Whereas in Asia, we didn't have many. So we should give peace a chance rather than war a chance. And so conflict resolution has to be seen more in an Asian perspective, and this is where probably India and Korea could play a very important role.
I see. Is that why the Prime Minister Modi has been active in sales diplomacy, going to Brisbane, coming to Korea and other countries?
Well, I would add that sales diplomacy is actually the part of President Park Geun-hye. So anyway, like the Indian foreign policy is governed by peaceful existence. Now you mentioned like China, like despite our differences, the Indian-China trade is growing. And of all the issues, like of course there are irritants in our relationship with China, but those irritants should not become deterrents in forging the relationship. Now coming back to that, India and China are part of BRICS Bank. Now recently an Indian has been appointed as the head of BRICS Bank, and an office is going to be in Shanghai. Now India is also part of the Chinese sponsored AIIB Bank, and there is a talk that India may get the second highest voting right. Now when it comes to real politics, of course India needs more partners and friends. Then we can say that South Korea is more reliable partner. That's what I think, because we don't have historical baggages or any lingering issues. So when it comes to trust or partner, but as I agree with Professor Roy that rather than we better use the engagement rather than any Western words.
But from Korea's point of view, Editor Choi, and also from the U.S. point of view, isn't there a kind of emphasis that if India can wield its influence more in the region, that becomes a kind of important factor in containing or having some kind of balance against China's rise? Is that thinking relevant?
Yes, the intention of Western world to see India against China is very clear, and Indians has a very complicated sentiment against China. China brought a huge humiliation, to Indians in 1962 Sino-Indian War, and Indians doesn't like to mention about it, but they're still their hearts are burning, I believe. But so that brings opportunity to Western countries like U.S. to check and balance against China, I believe. So you can see the border conflict articles in many of the Indian newspapers. So there are huge, very long, borderline. India has a very long borderline with China, and still they have border issues, border dispute in two major area, and so they have to settle the difference. And so from the U.S. side, they can use the India as a balanced power, and Korea is the same goes to Korea. So as the emergence of Korea, emergence of China, can bring the instability to these regions, and so Korea from the Korean side, the many friends like India, and is a better better chance.
That seems like a good wrap up on your side. I'd like to hear from other guests what advice you have. Throughout this discussion, the feeling we get is that there are a lot of opportunities going forward, despite the fact that we have not made much progress. But it seems like if the government and the leaders are focused on it, probably our plane of cooperation not only expands in the economic sector, but security and other cooperation. What would be your advice?
See, and now after the visit, as I already said, the Prime Minister has said there will be a special channel to facilitate the Korean business in India. Now there should be a institutional mechanism for the rigorous follow-up to be overseen by the top offices of both countries. Now, if there is a special channel in India for Korean business, I will suggest that there should be a special channel in Korea for the Korean business in India. So that will work much better. And finally, I will say India is a land of billions of opportunities. Like
literally.
Yeah, yeah. Tagore said, "Korea will be the lamp of the East." I will say like that. I wrote in Chosun Ilbo article, "Let Korea be the lamp of development and India be the lamp of growth." That's like there are a lot of opportunities for in both countries to cooperate.
That poetry has been always a kind of a lampstand between the two countries, and it generated a lot of good feelings between the two peoples, so that it will continue to develop. Dr. Cho, same question about the advice.
Yes, right. Yeah, India has a huge potentials. I agree. Totally, I agree. In terms of the business environment, India is just one of the emerging countries, and frankly speaking, the negotiations between the government is not easy. From my perspective, through the long observations of the relations between Korea and India, top-down approaches, like you already mentioned, the summit, is more effective rather than the system like the bottom-up the approaches. Last summit took in years to be held since 2014 summits in New Delhi. So I hope the summit will be held every year regularly. It is very good method to improve the cooperations between Korea and India effectively.
I see. Focusing on the communication side.
Yeah.
Professor Roy.
Yes, since Korea and India have no conflicting issues historically, we should make the best use of our past experience and build a better future. Korea is the 7th largest economy in the world, and it is restless to play a very positive role in the global arena. India is also emerging as a global leader, and it has its own leverage in UN or in other places. If the two countries hold hands together, probably it will be win-win situation for both the countries.
On that hopeful note, I thank you for your contribution and insights today. India is described as a continent masquerading as a country, and it can be complicated at times. But with her depth of history and great manpower, India always had great potential. The elevated relationship between India and Korea presents excellent opportunities for both countries. Korea might play a role in unlocking India's potential through collaboration in the economic as well as the security and diplomatic fronts. Let's keep an eye on the development of bilateral ties between Korea and India with foresight and patience. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.